Do you have plans for your garden this year? Have you even thought about having one? Well, in today's videos, I'm going to be sharing why I think you should have a garden plan and why I decided to put one together this year. Plus, I'll share a couple of ways that I think you can do this using both paid and free resources online. Let's get growing. Greetings and welcome to another edition of KT Outdoors, where we share content that helps you build local, healthy food resources by feeding the soil that feeds your body and your soul, all while saving you and your family money while increasing your food security. Many of us begin our gardening journey as casual gardeners. We have a small garden in the backyard maybe, buy a few plants of this or that and throw them into the ground and call it a garden. I know that's how I started almost 20 years ago. There wasn't really a plan. The beds weren't formally laid out or anything. It was just a space called a garden, and we put plants in it. I look back now and have at how many things I did wrong then, but it was a huge learning experience, and every year my skills improved and my gardens got better. If that's you, if you're just starting out right now, enjoy the ride and embrace the learning experiences. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to do some things wrong, and that's okay. However, at a certain point in our gardening evolution, we get to a point where we can see the importance of having a very organized garden plan. We learn how and when to start seeds to save money and increase our access to varieties not commonly available. We experience the changes in the growing seasons and see how some plants love the cool weather of the spring, while only to wither as the heat rises. We have looked at a piece of bare ground late in the garden season and realized that there's still 60 plus days of good growing conditions, but we don't know what to plant or if it's even worth the effort. And it's in these moments that we vow that next year, I'll do better. Well, friends, I'm here to tell you that I believe a big part of your success in the garden could come from having a detailed garden plan. Let's begin by talking about the basic elements of a plan and what information I think it should give you. For me, a garden plan in its most simple form will tell you what you need to plant, when you need to plant it, where it needs to be grown, when it needs to be harvested, and when it needs to be removed, thus potentially freeing up some space for something else to go in the ground behind it. What you need to plant allows you to stay focused on your gardening objectives. If you don't want to can a mess of green beans, then you don't need to grow a 20-foot row of them. Knowing what you need to plant keeps you focused when buying seeds and started plants, if you're not starting them on your own. It also allows you to take stock of your existing seed and place orders, well thought out online orders, early before seed supplies grow limited, which is already starting to happen, I'm afraid, and it's barely the end of January. So, my advice for any plan that you're making is begin with what you want to grow. Like, you need to know what it is that you want to come out of your garden, and a good way to make this decision is based on what you and your family actually eat now. So think about those things, figure out what you want to grow. Once you know what to grow, you can begin filling out some key details like sowing dates and how long until you can expect to harvest. Always remember that sowing dates are suggested for direct sowing. If you are starting seeds in a protected space, then you can start them even earlier than what's listed and thus hit your harvest windows sooner. And some plants you have to start early because there won't be enough time in a standard growing season for them to get to the point of being productive. Where it needs to grow allows you to begin thinking about both your available space and the space needs of a plant. It does you no good to start 10 heads of cabbage if you only have 2 square feet of growing space to plant them into. Do you have the space available to meet your target goals? Where are these things going to be grown at? For me, even after 20 years of gardening, one of the hardest things is knowing when to harvest certain plants. You can think that you will remember, but then you bite into an overripe corn cob and you realize that maybe noting a potential harvest time would have been smart. Every seed package has a days to maturity listed. Some plants are obviously easier to tell, but for some, knowing when they should be ripe allows you to know when you should start checking and picking. Furthermore, knowing when a plant can be harvested and for how long allows you to see the potential for succession planting and where you might find space for something else to grow. Which is our last point, knowing when a plant needs to be removed. Every plant has a lifespan of usefulness, and this is generally very well documented. Spinach and lettuce will eventually bolt and turn bitter while it tries to make seeds for the next generation. Same with cilantro and many other greens. Peas will eventually suffer in the heat and stop producing. Carrots will, at some point, need to come out of the ground. A gardener with a plan not only knows when these things will happen, they also know what will be planted behind them. And they may even already have those seedlings started and growing in reserve, so they are ready to be instantly plopped into the ground, literally the same day the first crop is removed. I know this seems like a lot to manage, but it doesn't have to be. If you are willing to spend some money, the best garden planner I have seen can be found on the Territorial Seed Company's website. It actually is a link to one of their sister websites, which is growveg.com. While I have yet to purchase this amazing tool, I have used the demo version and I am very tempted to pull the trigger. It literally does all the work for you. You simply lay out your beds in their software and add in the plants you want to grow. It will automatically calculate how many plants you can grow, when you should sow them, and when you can expect to harvest, all based on your actual geographical garden location. It's worth looking into, and I think when I checked, they have a month or a yearly subscription and a season subscription for somewhere between $29 and $40 per year. It's like one of those annual subscriptions to an online resource type thing. But the cool thing is, since it's an online resource, you can access everything that you do in that piece of software on your phone, on a tablet, on a computer or a Chromebook or something like that. So it's not like it's only one specific place that you can work on stuff. So it's really a tempting tool, and I may end up going that route at some point. If, however, you are like me and on a budget, and you're willing to do a little bit of legwork on your own to manage things, I have two potential solutions for you that I think could be really useful. They are, in fact, what I'm planning on using this year. Okay, the first one is to use an online calendar such as Google Calendar. If you can figure out all the sowing dates and harvest dates for the plants you want to grow, you can set reminders within the calendar. One benefit of this approach is that your phone or other devices that are connected to that calendar will give you reminders, thus creating a constant feedback mechanism reminding you that, hey, that corn over there is about ready to be harvested. You should start checking it. This method, however, won't address the amount of space you have and a few other things. So it will be up to you to figure out how many plants you can and should grow. But nonetheless, I think this is a very viable option, especially if you're starting out and you just need those simple reminders. The second option I actually built for our garden this season is a detailed spreadsheet that tracks all of this information that I'm recommending right now. I personally use Google Sheets, which has the added benefit of being viewable from my phone or a tablet while out in the garden and greenhouse if necessary. I built mine based on what I learned from using the Grow Veg Garden Planner years ago. It isn't nearly as slick, but I do have a map of the garden and a planting plan for the whole garden season. I did this by first creating a square grid and laying out my beds, which gives me a visual of how many square feet of growing space are actually available. I then broke each bed into 3 main growing cycles: spring, summer, and late summer/fall. This was enough to give me what I wanted to grow and where I wanted to grow it. I then linked that information to some general crop growing data, which allowed me to lay out sowing and harvesting windows based on typical grow lengths for the various plants, so I could see when various beds were going to be coming open and ready for the next round of plants. Using this method, I was able to completely stagger multiple corn plantings throughout the season to ensure that we have a steady flow of fresh sweet corn for over a month this season. I've never been able to do that before. It isn't perfect, but it's more of a plan than I have ever had going into the growing season, which has me excited. So there you go. I'm curious how many of you are just gardening, just throwing some plants in the ground, or are gardening with a specific plan in mind. If so, if you are making a plan, what resources do you use for planning your garden? If you're interested in a more detailed look at my garden planning document, comment down below or send me an email, and I will see about putting together a more detailed walkthrough of how I put it together so you can build one of your own. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode, and remember, life is better when it's lived outdoors. We'll see you next time.